How's it going?
Hi, Joe. It's going
Good to
great.
see you again.
Good to see you too.
Yes. What's new?
Uh, where shall I start? Well, I have this attention-grabbing, needy baby, NextData. So everything there is something new, like an infant that grows, and every day, they're changing so fast. It's the same here.
Yeah, but your infant seems to be growing up. You've been getting some press. Did a launch recently, so um, I think we've had this podcast slated for a bit. But I think we could always rehash the old stuff like data products and whatever. But I think you had something else in mind. So
Yeah, we just had our launch, so we've been kind of, reimagining, rethinking that data management layer, the layer that sits between the applications that want to use the data and below that layer, the compute and storage. So that layer, which is typically a bit of a hodgepodge of duct taped 50 different tools, and it is a layer that often organizations spend a lot of money build their own version before they abandon it and build another one and abandon, and
yeah,
we have 10 of those all usually running. And so we've been kind of rethinking that layer for the last 2.5 years and building it with a few first principles applied. And the very first principle is that that layer that is in charge of like allowing people to produce data, share data, govern data, that has to be simple, and simple to be fast, so that the energy and time goes into building the logic, interesting logic for sharing that data and complying with kind of quality and enabling applications to use that data in different modes as opposed to wiring technology together. So
right.
simple, stupid, fast for production from the production side, safe by default. Um, and for it to be fast, it has to be kind of parallelized. Like different people need to be able to generate data for sharing. That all of those kind of centralized bottlenecks from the control perspective, from management perspective, needs to be removed. And most importantly, whatever we build today, we're building in a world that is moving extremely fast in the application layer. So the
Hmm.
application layer, being MCP, yesterday RAG, before traditional ML, analytics, that layer is moving at a speed we've never seen before, and we probably won't see for quite a while. So that speed impedance between this like management layer, and which is, allows data sharing, and the application layer led to really, again, us reimagining what does this component that applications get to and discover, what does that look like. So then another first principle for us was it has to be, multimodality has to be built in.
Hmm.
So that, like, yesterday we could enable RAG access, and in a very short span of time you can add a module and add an MCP access, and good knows what it would be tomorrow. So yeah, so we've been like super busy building that, and we haven't really talked about it much. And then we launched the product and we showed it, and now that I'm super excited to see the conversations that it has started, and reflections, and
Hmm.
how different people, how market is like digesting it and responding to it. So we're right now, what's new is dealing with the aftermath of a product launch.
What are you hearing so far?
Yeah, really, I guess really encouraging in terms of, okay, like a lot of excitement about, we haven't thought about it this way, or this is going in a direction we like, a lot of enthusiasm or curiosity, um, kind of, how does this fit in my world? So looks very promising, we want to try it, can't wait to get my hands on it.
Right.
Also need to figure out how it fits into this world of pipelines and stuff that we've built. So I think we have a little bit of work to kind of clarify that, and we showed some of that in the launch. So people, I think, are going from um, awareness and understanding to, I want to try it and I want to see how it fits here. Um, I've been quite, I guess, encouraged by the analyst community, and reporters, which I,
You're talking the industry analysts, just to be clear.
oh yes, yes, industry
Yes.
and
Okay.
people that
Yeah.
analyze the space, and I've seen like really great report. The Cube early on had a fantastic, thought-provoking report on how does a move like what we have built, stack up against the incumbents and the people, the last mile that people have been fighting for. I mean, there are a few miles that people are fighting for grabbing.
Hmm.
One is like at the bottom layer of the stack around file formats and table formats, and then at the top of the stack around the management. So that's kind of the layer we play in. So really, really, really encouraging analysis that has coming, and some more amusing and some more informative. LinkedIn is an evidence of those. I think what it's resonating both with kind of our early customers, the more than nearly half of our inbound. So we have a few kind of use cases that we satisfy. I mean, it's always the problem. There's the problem of complexity. So organizations
Hmm.
that have diverse tech stacks and lots of people, and they need to enable data for AI analytics fast and safe, are our typical customers. And when they come in, they often, they explain their pain points in different ways. Sometimes they say, oh, we need a standardized way to do data product management. We've been talking about it internally, and we give them a springboard. Instead of talking, let's just start building and shipping value. So some are under that like standardization of data products use case, which under it has, we want to move faster, produce more with less. The situation with kind of macro economy forces that. Um, and then, we want to get reusability. We want to have governance built in. Discovery is currently broken because it's disconnected. Catalog is disconnected. Reality, like that's just general vicinity of like data product management. And then there is the use case of data for AI. Like we can see
Hmm.
how this can accelerate that. And that is a very interesting space, and that is where this kind of product is resonating most, because
Interesting.
um, it's really interesting, Joe. Like what I see is CEOs going rogue. You think business unit is going rogue? CEOs are going rogue, as in the executives and CEOs of these massive companies see the potential, and they want to get there, and they know that existing data platform and platform owners and data stack is not catching up. So they're opening, new lines of funding, new accelerated AI organizations to move the kind of their Gen AI agenda forward with a new tech stack in terms of support for data. Of course, that tech stack can't be disconnected from what the data they have right now, because that's what they're not going to generate greenfield data, but a new approach. So that is a pattern that we're seeing more, that the data teams are like, this is the same way that you see the kind of the speed mismatch between the application layer and between the like AI application layer and the data layer. You see the same kind of speed mismatch at the organizational layer. The ambitions of CEOs are just flying high, where the data platform leaders are just trying to figure out how to go any faster with safety, given that they're still already struggling meet the business needs on traditional speed, AI, ML, and data. So that's, and I think that is what's resonated most with both the analyst community, industrial analyst, and the customer conversations that we're having. And we are most excited too, right? We're looking for opportunities to kind of to enable people to move fast at
Hmm.
scale with safety.
The safety part is interesting. I think because especially right now in the era where vibe coding, I think, is becoming a bit of the norm as well. So it's just almost this tale of two to, I don't even know how you would describe it really, but there's parallel paths happening. So it's
Yeah. No, that is like I wish I could remember this library's name. We are, I think, at the like we're standing, I feel like that cave person, cave woman, caveman many years ago stood and looked at fire
mhm.
and they couldn't even imagine what this fire is going to do to them, help them digest food faster, grow their brains bigger, and invent things that they couldn't even, possibly fathom. That's what's happening right now, and we're going to be burning ourselves with that fire quite a bit before we know how to harness the fire, burning a few forests down. And I think, yeah, it is really interesting. Like I was looking at this library yesterday, which from Stanford, a simple Python library, and I forgot its name. It's embarrassing. And uh, it was a response to how prompt based development is so hard to manage as code. Like prompt as code management is
Mhm.
hard. So instead of like try to wrangle these prompts that you give, to your agent to do what you want it to do in a more predictable, at least to somewhat predictable way, why don't you write code in Python from which the prompt can be generated? So we're back in code again. So I think everything as code is a universal truth that will, I mean, as far as I can see in the future, will not go away. Even if it's prompt as code or data as code or policy as code in terms of like the
Mhm.
governance piece, that is that is just so inherently built into this like laws of physics of our industry, um, and that's the only way that kind of we can scale with safety built in. So for us, it was the most basic feature that we built into this kind of idea of the autonomous data product, that every data product will have um, kind of guardrails and controls and checks on two sides before it gets its data in and before it promotes its data or new generated data for access. And that policy is really, or those contracts and those controls, we call them expectations, promises on issue instantiation, before data, after data, are maintained as code, run as code, get validated as code. Um, and again, it's always this like you need to have when you build safe systems, like safe systems need to scale. So there was a reason why we had zero trust architecture when we scaled digital systems with services. So it's the same principle of zero trust architecture in a way that every touch point with each of these autonomous data products has safety built in as code, imposed and monitored. Not only that, you need to still have an external system that can validate whether these data products have their safety built in or not, because it's still at the mercy of the person that's developing them to put them in. So we have this like a distributed trust system that internally to the data product you have those policy controls as code, contracts as code, written enforced for every touch point being data in, data out. And then you have an external system that is validating, not enforcing, but is just validating. Does this data product have X or Y or Z controls that I expect it to have? Does this have its data, PII data encrypted? Does this, and if not, you can't really do anything about it by shut it down.
Yeah.
But at least you know that it's there, shut it down. You're not trying to like put the control here to go and make the PII encrypted, but you have the control. I think there is plenty opportunity to reimagine safety as code in a scalable way.
Well, you
Um,
mentioned this interesting term, people. That uh, in the age of AI, it's yeah, well, we'll see. But how are you envisioning decentralization and autonomous data products in an era where perhaps the workflows are AI and agent first, and the people aren't involved at all. How are you reimagining that? And I would say to a broader extent, applications themselves, because it's something I've been pondering a lot too. Like, what is this
Yeah.
architecture?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We just had I think we showed some of that in our launch video, and we were gonna be
It's
sharing
a
more,
bit, yeah.
yeah, more kind of use cases. I think if you think about, I think there are multiple angles to think about it. We often shorthanded internally in the company, we say by Gen AI, for Gen AI, which is, so let's talk about the for Gen AI, for agents, for machine. For machine means now, at least in case of layer that we're sitting, like the data management, for machine does not have a human to come and discover and understand the data the way that human understands, browse things, search for things. Or for machine expects the data in a format that machine understands. Yesterday was vector for rack, and today is MCP for point, like function calls, and something else tomorrow. And that layer will be changing like super, super fast. And if you think about that, and again, the scale is fundamental, right? So for when you think about when we wrote the product, we had three main journeys. The journey was the journey of the data product producer, like just right off the bat, right from the source, like the left hand most hand side of your organization. What is their journey to be generating data fast? And then there was the journey of consumer. How do they under, explore, search, trust, understand, get access, use fast and safe, and hopefully with joy? And then there's the journey of the kind of maybe more not as first class journey, but you have two other supplemental journey, which is the journey of like a platform manager that provides the infrastructure or our platform as a service, and then the journey of the manager that is kind of observing. But when you put now agents in front of, instead of these people, put agents in and say, okay, if the agent's producing the data, what would be the experience? So you give them prompts, and those prompts turn into probably some sort of code. But then all of those safety parameters in terms of the expectations of this data and its quality and so on, it needs to be still coded in. And when you think about the discovery, the way agents work, they would need to they're very, very sensitive to the context.
Mhm.
So, in fact, more is not more is less. So, the difference between on the consumer side from how we trained ML model, which was more is more, you give, kind of you try to find the signal in a lot of noise, but you wanted all the data, all the signals in the raw format, and so on. With agents, that would be the worst possible outcome. I mean, there's papers around like how domain aware context or domain oriented or subject matter expertise context is most important for an agent. So then for an agent that is answering a question about, I don't know, they have a goal to, I don't know, predict your sales and then make fire up promotional emails based on trending sales or whatever, if that their goal is, they need to be able to automatically find the context that is relevant to them, um, and only the pieces that is relevant to them, not all of the context, for the goal and the job and the prompt they have been given. And they have to they have to be able to do this more dynamically and automatically without you wiring the endpoints where they need to go get the data. So they need to do an automatic discovery of what's relevant to them based on the prompt, find it, select it, and then filter the data that is relevant to them. So for that flow of an agent to be possible, then um, again, our approach is like super opinionated, as that you need domain-oriented data products that automatically kind of share all of their semantic in a way that then the machine can use the prompt to discover the semantic that is relevant to them. So point them to the endpoint of the data product. You need to provide your data in a format that they understand. So if it's a RAG,
Yeah.
it's a vector. If it's an MCP, it's just a bunch of function calls. And that discoverable semantic of this day, or domain-oriented semantic needs to be dynamic. As in, there's not who human is going to catalog the thing for you and
Right.
add the semantic for you. That's rich semantic needs to come from the data product automatically, and that's why we call it autonomous. So I think it's for us, it was interesting because all of these capabilities I just talked about, automatic discoverability, semantic domain oriented, semantic first data products, data and compute and semantic living together, like all of those were part of the first principles of the platform, but they started kind of becoming extremely relevant to Gen AI case because Gen AI takes us to an extreme of human, kind of human needs. Now it's a machine,
Yeah.
it's not a human, right? So this is a much, much, much faster, more effective, efficient human.
One thing I've always wanted to ask you was, back when you were starting NextData, this was before ChatGPT and the ensuing
Yeah.
tsunami that caused in the world. What was that experience like seeing? I guess your trajectory of sort of building something based on data mesh and so forth to today, which seems similar-ish but very different in other ways. What was that? What was that like?
Yeah, going through seeing the market change and then
Yeah.
how do we adapt? How do we adapt to that?
Hmm.
Um, so I share a little bit of an emotional reaction that happened, and then in practice, what lasted let's say pre ChatGPT, post ChatGPT, when what changed. My emotional reaction at the beginning was, oh man, we've been talking about this kind of, domain oriented, isolated, autonomous, like kind of data products that built by different teams and organizations are buying, like understanding that and caring about that. What if this illusion of Gen AI takes us back to dump the whole damn thing into, into a bucket and get on with it, and then the AI will figure it out? There was a moment in time that I said, we are now on a trajectory that meets speed and scale with responsibility, right? And that trajectory can get completely diverted by this like kind of halo of AI can do anything, just throw more data. And that didn't happen. So, in fact, the opposite happened. In fact, people became aware that now I need more domain oriented, more parallelized, faster data, but locally controlled data with zero trust architecture, all that sort of stuff. So it was like, okay, that's great. We're still on the same trajectory. The trajectory of the technology didn't change, or where people, what good looks like didn't change. What did change? So a lot of those first principles didn't change. As we were building, multimodality was already a problem. Multimodality on the output and input. So multimodality on the output is that it's the same semantic of data. It's sales predictions, but sometimes we encode it as tables because that's how
Right.
SQL works and it has relational data. Sometimes we encode it as files because that feature kind of development and ML on working on columns and features work. For us, it was just another mode. Now you want vector embeddings, or you want functions for like narrow calls to this data, the MCP. And God knows what will be tomorrow. But it was really built into the architecture because it was just a continuation of a trend that had begun with BI to ML and forward, and then we had to kind of sustain it. So those sort of things, it just was a really natural fit, domain oriented natural fit. So those things didn't change. What changed, which we had to double down on, was the expectation of the market on speed. So before ChatGPT or this generation of technologies, AI technologies, people were comfortable with yet another transformation, yet another replatforming, hire a whole bunch of contractors, run
Yep.
a 3 year, 18-month at least transformation program, multiple millions. And we had to figure out the cold bootstrapping of this new generation of kind of data management um, in a few seconds. Like the expectation of how fast we need to move changed. And then the other thing along the way that changed was um, the programming like interface. Um, going from kind of YAML and DSLs and domain specific languages with whatever Python YAML for it to become English. So, so I think a lot of this, like our obsession with declarative expression of things, like every time you put a YAML in front of a buyer, will say, "Oh, great, it's a YAML. I don't need programmers." And I think I always think to myself, "Oh my God, you have no idea what you're getting yourself to." By getting excited YAML, because it cares for that first 10%, and the next 90%, at the moment you touch it, it's going to hurt you. You can't debug it, you can't understand it, you can't, you know, all of those things why we have programming languages. So I think that that shifted because you can have the most expressive way to describe an interface, which is code, and then on top of it, you can have English. So you
Mm-hmm.
can tell an agent in English to do what needs to be done, which is a kind of less frictionful way of it. And that can turn into that most expressive language code. So for us, we took those two expectations in terms of fast cold bootstrap and the human computer interface turning to natural language. We doubled down on kind of both of those, and we showed NextD as a multi-agent system that does the transformation, essentially copilot, become a transformation copilot for you. And then the second piece was we doubled down on kind of more of an imperative description of your data products, and then build simple natural language on top to create it, or whatever the interface is. Like you can go up and down the stack as human language versus code versus YAML, somewhere in between.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So these are like the two that comes to mind. And I think the last one I would say is that optimizing for Gen AI use case was the one that we picked on. We had to pick as well. So optimizing that
Yeah.
multimodality for Gen AI, optimizing multimodality on the input for Gen AI, data being unstructured or any other random APIs in the world become the source of your data. So these are some of the things we had to very quickly respond to. But I feel like we were in a good place. Like we didn't have to change
Yeah.
our architecture. We didn't have to like
Oh,
pivot
that's
our
good.
mental model. Yeah.
Jeez. I know you got to cut to a meeting in a bit. Kind of closing out, what are you most excited about over, say, the next year?
So from the company perspective, I think it's just we're at the cusp of the next phase, right? You start a company, it's like an infant, and then you got to make it grow, go past infancy, and grow and go to market, and growth of adoption. So that's just company growth, typical stuff from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 10. So that's both very terrifying and exciting. From the technology perspective, yeah, I am super excited to kind of unleash the power of this baby that we built, and get it into the hands of the users. And be able to have the resources to opening it up more, whatever shape or form it will have, I don't exactly know, but getting more kind of users' hands in a community version of it. Um,
I
yeah,
would love that
that's
too.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That it's just as a startup, like you've got to
it's
do
hard.
it's really hard. You've got to do one thing and one thing really well before you do other things.
Yeah.
And usually you need to do it right. You need to have resources, need to have money, and it's
Yeah.
just yeah. So I'm excited for next year. We be able to allocate resources to make that a reality.
That's so cool. Well, Zhamak, it's always good to talk with you. And thanks for taking the time. I know you're slammed, but we catch up. So,
I appreciate
um,
it. So,
yeah, anytime. Cool.
yeah.
Well, hopefully see you around. So, bye.
See you soon.
Bye. I see
Bye.
you.